Maria Elena exposes the Vatican's darkest fear. Her brother saw Tagle as the future, but powerful cardinals call him dangerous. The Filipinos' views on gay Catholics, divorced believers, and church wealth have sparked secret opposition. Maria Elena reveals how her brother confessed his frustration with those blocking Tagle's rise. The smiling cardinal appears gentle in public, but in private meetings, he's challenged traditions that have stood for centuries. The battle for the church's soul has just begun. People call Tagle many things: the Asian Francis, the smiling priest, the hopeful leader. But to Maria Elena, he is something more. He reminds her of Jorge, not the Pope, but the brother who danced with her in the kitchen when their father died, the one who stayed strong when their world fell apart, the one who believed that faith was not something you say, it's something you live. That's what she sees in Tagle too. Tagle's life was never about fame. He never chased power. He worked in places most people ignore: poor villages, crowded prisons, broken communities. He listened more than he spoke. He smiled when others shouted. He walked into pain and stayed there, not because he had to, but because he couldn't walk away. That's what Maria Elena sees: a man who serves with joy and leads without pride. To understand her, you have to go back. Her childhood wasn't filled with gold ceilings or soft robes. She grew up in a small Argentine home where love was quiet and steady. Her father worked on the railways, hands always rough, voice always low. Her mother held the family together with strength that didn't bend. They didn't have much, but they had everything that mattered: respect, faith, and the kind of love that didn't need to be explained. She was the youngest of 5. Her brother Jorge was the oldest. Long before the world called him Pope Francis, he was the one who held her hand at night, the one who taught her how to be strong when they lost their father, the one who made her laugh when silence felt too heavy. He wasn't perfect. He was tough. He had opinions that didn't always fit the room, but he was real, and she never forgot that. When Jorge left for Rome, she felt it deep inside. A piece of her went with him. They still spoke often. No titles, no show, just brother and sister. When he became Pope in 2013, she didn't run to the cameras. She cried. Not because she was sad, but because she knew what it meant. She knew the church had gained a leader, but she had lost a little more of her brother. She even hoped it wouldn't happen. Not because she didn't believe in him, but because she knew how lonely that path would be. She admitted it. It was selfish, she said, but I was afraid I was losing my brother to the world. Still, she never let that fear win. When Jorge asked her not to come to his inauguration, she didn't argue. She took the money she would have spent on the trip and gave it to charity. She doesn't speak like a saint. She doesn't try to impress. What she says feels raw, simple, and heavy, like someone who's been through too much to pretend. Maria Elena doesn't hide the fire she walked through. She shows the burns, not to ask for pity, but because they're part of who she is. That honesty, quiet and deep, has traveled far beyond Buenos Aires. People don't listen to her out of curiosity. They listen out of respect. She's not just the Pope's sister. She's a mother who stood strong when life pushed hard. She raised her children with a kind of strength that doesn't scream. It just refuses to break. Her voice is soft, but her will is solid steel. Her daughter Cristina lives in Madrid and paints. But these aren't just pretty paintings. They carry emotion, history, and something close to sacred. Cristina doesn't preach, but her work does. Each stroke of color says things no sermon could. It's her way of telling the truth, without needing to wear a robe or stand at a pulpit. Her son, Jose Ignacio, is more quiet. He speaks of their family not as a grand legacy, but as a story still unfolding. He never chases fame. None of them do. They carry their name with quiet pride, not to be praised, but to give meaning to every day they live. But Maria Elena's life hasn't been soft. In 2015, her body gave in to illness. People thought she might finally fall apart, but she didn't. She met pain the same way she met everything else, with a small smile that refused to give up. When someone asked how she survived, she didn't talk about strength or fear. She talked about laughter, not fake laughter, not the kind that hides pain, real laughter. Jokes told between hospital visits, silly stories that made them smile through tears. We've laughed through the worst, she once said, because even in death, love doesn't leave us. She still carries the memory of her brothers and sister, Alberto, Marta, Oscar, all of them gone, but not forgotten, not in some cold, quiet way. She remembers them by how she lives. She turns grief into something strong, not by escaping it, but by walking with it day after day. She once said, there were days when it felt like sadness would crush us, but in their family, even on the darkest nights, someone always smiled. And that smile, that one little moment of light, was enough to keep going. That sentence, spoken so simply, says everything about her, because surviving isn't always about winning. Sometimes it just means staying. It means showing up. It means choosing joy, not because life is good, but because love still burns inside you. That kind of love is what makes her the quiet force behind Pope Francis. The Pope changed how the Church looks at the world, with mercy, humility, and care. But he didn't learn those values from books. He learned them at the family table, in a tiny kitchen where food was stretched to feed many and where no one forgot to pray. Maria Elena lived those values when no one was watching. She forgave without being asked. She gave without expecting thanks. For anyone who's ever been the quiet one holding things together while everyone else chased dreams, her story hits home. Maria Elena didn't seek the spotlight, but her presence was the kind that held everything up. While others spoke, she listened. While others argued, she offered peace. And while the world watched her brother rise to the highest seat in the Catholic Church, she remained grounded, choosing grace over fame and silence over applause. Now, with the world mourning the loss of Pope Francis, eyes have turned toward the future. But the question isn't just about who comes next. It's about what comes next. What kind of church will emerge? Will it follow the same path or take a different one? Inside the Vatican, the talk has already begun. Names are being mentioned. Ideas are floating through marble hallways and whispered behind closed doors. One of the names you'll hear more than once is Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. He isn't just well-liked. He represents something deeper, something many believe the Church desperately needs now: compassion, humility, and truth without showmanship. And maybe that's why Maria Elena has chosen now to speak. She's not trying to shape the outcome. She's trying to shine light on the quiet things that matter. At a time when the world is full of noise, her words feel like a pause, a breath, a reminder that true greatness doesn't need to announce itself. As May draws near, the pressure builds. Inside the Vatican walls, preparations are quietly underway. The Sistine Chapel is getting ready for another chapter in its long, solemn history. 135 cardinals will walk in, each carrying not just their robes and rituals, but their doubts, hopes, and memories. More than 80% of them were appointed by Francis. You'd think that would mean a clear direction, but that's not how it works. Francis didn't choose men just like him. He chose a mix. Voices from every part of the world, some from crowded cities, others from quiet corners of forgotten countries, some with bold visions for change, others holding tight to tradition. Their beliefs are not all the same. Their priorities don't always match. What they form is not a team, it's a mosaic. And like any mosaic, it's beautiful but unpredictable. That's why this conclave feels different, more uncertain, more human. Reporters, clergy, and even longtime Vatican watchers admit it's hard to guess where this is going. There's no clear frontrunner, no favorite, just a shared feeling that something big is at stake, and that whoever rises next will be stepping into a world full of pressure, confusion, and longing. For truth, for leadership, for light. But what are they really looking for? Not a resume, not a campaign. This isn't politics. It's something deeper. Every man in that room is supposed to listen, not just to each other, but to God. Still, each one will walk in with questions that won't leave them alone. Can the next pope balance progress with faith? Can he push for reform without losing what's sacred? Can he face modern chaos and still protect ancient truths? Some cardinals might want a steady hand. Others might want a bold voice. Some want a shepherd, others want a strategist. But what they all want, what they all need, is someone who can do both. At 70 years old, Cardinal Pietro Parolin has become one of the most talked about figures in the race for the next pope. He's not loud, not flashy, but he's powerful. As the Vatican's Secretary of State, he's basically the Church's top diplomat. He knows how to stay calm, speak to powerful nations, and keep the Vatican running like a quiet machine. People respect him because he doesn't chase the spotlight. He stays in the middle, never too conservative, never too progressive. Betting markets mention him often. Even AI models, after being fed data from past conclaves, see him as a front-runner. Parolin represents stability. He's the kind of man who keeps the boat steady, but even the steadiest boat can have cracks. One of the biggest issues tied to his name is the Vatican-China deal. Some call it smart diplomacy. Others say it traded away truth for political peace. That's where the doubt starts. They ask, does he have a shepherd's heart or just a strategist's brain? That question haunts his perfect resume. Then there's Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle from the Philippines. He's 67. He's not just supported by Pope Francis, he's loved by millions. People call him the Asian Francis, and not just because of his views. It's how he carries himself. He hugs the homeless, he cries at Mass, he speaks with a kind of gentleness that makes people stop and listen. He doesn't just talk about the gospel, he lives it in places like Africa, Asia, and Latin America, where the Church is still growing fast. Tagle isn't just respected, he's deeply loved. People say when he speaks, you don't just hear words, you feel them. His heart is wide open. But the question that lingers is this: can such a soft heart run such a hard machine? The Vatican is full of politics, power struggles, and tradition. It's not built for emotion, it's built for control. Can Tagle handle that? Some think maybe not, but others say that's exactly why he should lead. Because the Church needs more heart, not more control. Tagle's recent exit from Caritas Internationalis wasn't smooth. That charity organization faced leadership changes that left many confused. Some insiders began asking whether Tagle had the strength to manage tough situations. He's a pastor, no doubt, but can he lead in a place where emotion isn't enough? Still, for many, those flaws only make him more human. They don't scare people, they connect with them. In a world tired of polished power, Tagle's soft voice feels honest. It feels real. Then there's Cardinal Matteo Zuppi. He's from Italy, and many call him the people's priest. He doesn't shout. He doesn't stand above others. He walks with them. His life has been about helping migrants, feeding the poor, and bringing peace where there's chaos. He's deeply connected to Pope Francis's vision and is seen as a moral guide in Italy. But even with his strong reputation, he's not seen as a big player inside the Vatican. That's a problem. In conclaves, being holy isn't always enough. Politics still plays a part. And Zuppi, as gentle and beloved as he is, might not have the connections or the influence to win votes. Some say his kindness is both his power and his weakness. And then there's Cardinal Peter Erdo from Hungary, a man known for his sharp mind, his deep knowledge of church law, and his serious approach to faith and structure. He's not warm like Tagle. He's not quiet like Zuppi. He's firm, intellectual, and deeply respected for his legal knowledge. To many, he's the definition of a traditionalist. To others, he's what the Church needs to bring order back. At 72, Cardinal Erdo walks into the conclave with something rare: clarity. While many speak in circles, he speaks straight. He's calm, strict, and knows canon law like the back of his hand. For those who think Pope Francis changed too much too fast, Erdo feels like a return to solid ground, a voice of order, a spine of tradition. But for others, that same clarity feels cold. Some fear he may close doors that were just beginning to open. The Church needs truth, but also warmth. Erdo may find it hard to hold both without letting one slip. Far from Rome, another name stirs hearts: Cardinal Turkson of Ghana. He's 76, calm as a river, but powerful in presence. For years, he has spoken for the poor, for peace, for the planet. Not from a stage, but from the trenches. If chosen, he'd be the first African pope in over 1,000 years. It wouldn't just be a headline, it would be history. But inside the Vatican, history doesn't always win. Age, politics, and quiet doubts may stand in his way. Then there's Uele from Canada, 80 years old, a man of deep faith, wide experience, and long memory. He's been there through it all. The quiet meetings, the loud reforms. But time hasn't been kind. Age is a shadow. Past controversies linger. Some say his moment came and went. Still, in Rome, memories matter. Old names never vanish completely. But conclaves don't begin with voting. They begin with whispers, in corners, over coffee, in long hallway walks. That's where real choices are born, not with speeches, but with silence. Trust builds. Ideas shift, front runners fall, quiet names rise. It's not logic that leads, it's something else, something sacred. Even with all the data in the world, odds, polls, algorithms, you still can't predict the next pope. Machines can scan centuries. They can spot trends. They can count how many times Parolin's name comes up or how Tagle's support grows. But they can't feel prayer. They can't hear the spirit move. This isn't just a game of odds. It's a leap into the unknown. This time, the Church could choose someone from the edge of the map, not from the marble halls of Europe, but from the dust of barrios or the heat of African plains. Maybe someone who learned faith in the dark, someone who grew up kneeling in small churches where the roof leaked, someone who knows how to listen before he speaks. If you've ever hoped for a church that sits with the broken, not above them, this is your moment. If you've prayed for a pope who doesn't just lead, but understands, your voice echoes in this gathering. Because the next pope won't just speak from balconies. He'll carry the weight of a wounded world. He'll guide not just doctrine, but hearts. And now, the world waits. The floors are swept, the ballots prepared. The Sistine Chapel watches in silence. When the smoke rises, everything changes. Maybe the name will be Erdo, maybe Turkson, maybe Tagle, or maybe someone no one expects. But this isn't about winning, it's about calling. A new chapter, not a power shift. As the final days ticked down, Rome felt heavier. Not loud, not busy, just full. Every step in the apostolic palace seemed softer, slower. Something was happening. Something deep. Outside, cameras flashed. Inside, prayers whispered. No one talked about favorites anymore. They talked about readiness. From every corner of the world, they came. Some had seen war. Others preached through storms. Some came from cold stone cathedrals. Others from muddy village chapels. But all had seen change. All had felt the cracks in faith and still stood. One came from South Sudan. His church burned, but he still forgave. Another from South Korea, where silent worship shook souls more than choirs. Another from Bolivia lost his brother to violence and still chose peace. They didn't arrive with banners. They came with scars. In the hall, they spoke, not to impress, but to share. The next pope, one said, must sit with the wounded before he speaks to the world. Another whispered, he must revive, not preserve. A third said, don't pick the one who shines, pick the one who listens. Tourists kept walking. Reporters kept guessing. But inside, time stretched. The cardinals prayed more, talked less. Eyes were tired. Hearts were full. This wasn't about names anymore. It was about surrender, about finding the one who didn't want the job, but was made for it. Tagle's name kept coming up, not loudly, not with force, but with a kind of quiet weight. People spoke of him with respect, even with love. He wasn't just another candidate. He was something softer, the kind that didn't grab attention but left a mark. Some cardinals cried when they remembered his homilies. Others admired how he faced pain head-on, but there were still doubts. Some whispered that love alone wasn't enough. They wondered if he had the strength to lead through chaos, not just comfort. Parolin had a different kind of pull. He was steady, predictable, the man who understood the system and could keep it from falling apart. To many, that was enough. But even those who supported him had to ask, could he move hearts or just manage files? Then there was Zuppi, gentle, brave in his own way, the kind of man who felt at home both in a cathedral and in a refugee camp. His empathy was real, but empathy wasn't always power. Some thought he didn't have the backbone for the battles ahead. Still, people noticed him more and more, not because he campaigned, but because he simply showed up and listened. Then, from the edges, came names no one had expected. A Nigerian cardinal who had faced down violence and still preached peace. A Chilean bishop who slowly rebuilt trust where it had been shattered. A Vietnamese man who had been locked up for years only to walk out of prison with forgiveness on his lips. These were not names in the press, but they were names in prayers. And while the world speculated, inside a quiet home behind Vatican walls, Maria Elena Bergoglio stayed away from it all. She didn't want the spotlight, but every morning, she lit a candle. She didn't pray for victory. She prayed that whoever was chosen wouldn't lose himself. She prayed for the soul of the man, not the success of the Pope. In her kitchen, while the radio murmured about frontrunners and ballots, she whispered, "God, give us a shepherd who remembers what it means to be a sheep." All over the world, others did the same. A grandmother in Brazil, a teenager in Uganda, a priest in Ukraine saying Mass beneath sirens, a nun in Mexico moving her fingers over a worn rosary, a family in Poland praying not for a name, but for the soul of the church. They didn't know each other, but their hearts beat together. Because this wasn't just about cardinals behind closed doors, it was about everyone. The widow in New Delhi, the child in Detroit, the homeless man who crossed himself outside St. Peter's. This moment was theirs too. As the sun went down over Rome and the stones of St. Peter's glowed with the last of the day's light, the cardinals sat in quiet rooms, thinking, tomorrow, the Sistine Chapel would close, the doors would lock, the ballots would be cast, smoke would rise. Not white, not yet, but something sacred was stirring. Morning came slowly, like the world was holding its breath. The sun rose over Vatican City, but gently, as if even it knew not to break the stillness. Birds circled quietly above the square. People gathered, but they spoke in softer tones. Not because they cared less, but because this felt too holy to shout about. Inside, the cardinals dressed in silence. Their red robes were laid out. No one rushed. No one joked. This was serious, and they all felt it. Soon, they would walk into a room few ever see. And what they would do inside, no one else could do for them. They weren't choosing a favorite. They were trying to hear the will of God. Slowly, they made their way through the long halls toward the chapel. Their shoes made almost no sound. The Sistine Chapel doors were open, waiting for them. Michelangelo's towering painting stared down from above, as if to say, "Are you ready to be judged?" The words were spoken, extra omnes. All outsiders left. The heavy doors shut. The air inside shifted. The world held its breath. Inside, they sat. Not a word, just the quiet sound of cloth, of pens, of nervous breath. In the center stood the altar. Next to it, the urns that would hold their choices. A crucifix watched over them all, not just for show. It reminded them who they served. An old cardinal stepped forward, not a candidate, just a wise man with a steady voice. He didn't talk about politics or factions. He just said, "Brothers, we are not here to choose a leader. We are here to listen for the shepherd's voice. May the one we choose be the one heaven has already chosen." The world waited in silence, not for a king, not for a politician, but for a servant, one chosen not just by votes, but by something higher. In a small house in Buenos Aires, a woman lit a candle. Her name was Maria Elena. Every morning since her brother's death, she did the same thing, but this day felt heavier. The photo in her hands didn't show robes or rings. It showed a boy in a kitchen, his arm around her, smiling with flour on his cheek. That was Jorge, not Pope Francis, just Jorge. She whispered a prayer, a simple one. "Give them courage. Let them choose the one you've sent, not the one they want." She didn't need to see the vote. She didn't need to hear the names. She believed the right one would be chosen. Somewhere across the ocean, in Rome, the cardinals had gathered. One by one, they stepped forward. They placed their hands on their chests and made their oath before God. There were no speeches, just Latin prayers and the shuffle of feet on stone. Votes were cast. Each name carried weight. Tagle, Parolin, Zuppi, Erdo, Turkson. No one name stood above the rest. Not yet. The ballots burned. Black smoke rose. Disappointment drifted over the crowd like mist, but no one left. They stayed, waiting, praying, watching that chimney. Inside, the mood had changed. Eyes met differently now. Suspicion faded. Questions lingered. Was it time to listen more deeply? Another vote. And somewhere far away, Maria Elena sat by her candle, tea cooling beside her. Her prayer hadn't changed. She didn't ask for a result. She asked for faith. The day moved slowly. The sky above St. Peter's Square darkened. A soft drizzle fell. Umbrellas opened. Rosaries passed through fingers. No one knew how long this would last, but they stayed. This was no election. This was a sacred waiting. In the Sistine Chapel, the cardinals bowed their heads. They weren't strategists anymore. They were pilgrims. Each man brought his own wounds, hopes, and fears. Each vote was a surrender. The chapel stopped being a room for decisions. It became something older, something holy. The second count began. White smoke burst into the sky. The bells rang. The crowd roared. Strangers embraced. Flags waved. Across the world, churches opened. Masses began. Candles were lit. In the Philippines, children danced barefoot. In Lebanon, a priest cried through a speaker. In Buenos Aires, Maria Elena wiped away a tear. Her prayer had been heard. The red curtains opened. The cardinal stepped forward. His voice shook. Habemus Papam, we have a pope. The name followed. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. Silence, then awe, then joy. A man from the margins, a man from the streets, a man who held lepers and comforted children. When he appeared on the balcony, he didn't wave. He bowed. The crowd fell quiet. The wind tugged at his cassock. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost lost, but everyone heard him. Before I bless you, I ask you to bless me. Let us walk together. Let us heal together. Let us hope together. In that moment, he wasn't just the Pope. He was someone familiar, someone human. And in the quiet of her home, Maria Elena didn't cheer. She didn't rise. She simply folded her hands and whispered, "Keep him small. Make him strong."